Okay, so now we're going to start talking about angle pairs. So in this section, we're going to talk about two angles, and you really want to think about what their relationship is to each other. Okay, they may add up to something, they may equal to each other, they just might be next to each other in the picture. Okay, so you're going to use that information to analyze diagrams. Sometimes we'll use that information to write equations. Um, and as we go on, we're going to learn some theorems about a little more into if angles have this relationship, then we can assume something else is true as well. Okay, so the first two types of angle pairs that we're going to talk about are complementary and supplementary angles. Okay, so complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees, and supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So it's basically the same idea, but each one of these adds up to a different number. A lot of people will remember that complementary comes first in the alphabet, so it's the smaller number. It adds up to 90, whereas supplementary is second, so it adds up to the bigger number, which is 180. So to draw a picture for this, we know that a 90-degree angle is a right angle. So these two could add up to be a right angle. So if I have something like this, and I know it's a right angle, but I divide it into two pieces, then this top angle and the bottom angle would add up to 90. So we would write the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 90. Okay, but there's nothing in the definition that says they have to be next to each other like that. You could have an angle over here that's 60 degrees, and we'll call that angle T. And then we have another angle over here. They're not even touching. And this one is angle R. This is 30 degrees. 60 plus 30 is 90. So even though they're not touching or anything, they would be complementary. So the measure of angle T plus the measure of angle R equals 90. Okay, so the same thing with supplementary. 180 degrees, we already learned, is a straight angle. So a straight angle basically makes a straight line. So if I draw a straight angle and divide it into two separate angles, we can call those angles 3 and 4. So now the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 4 is 180, which means those two angles are supplementary. But just like before, there's nothing in the definition that says they have to be touching each other. So we could have one here. We'll make this one 80 degrees. One here that's 100 degrees. So 100 plus 80 is 180. Let's call them A and B. So the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B equals 180. So those are also supplementary. Okay. Supplementary and complementary are really long words. So I will usually abbreviate complementary as just COMP, and supplementary will be SUPP. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about are adjacent angles. So adjacent, we're going to have lots of words that have meanings in English as well as in geometry, and the meanings here are very similar to each other. So adjacent, if you just talked about something that is adjacent to you, it is something that is next to you. So the word adjacent means next to. So we want two angles that are next to each other. So basically, if I have, I'm going to draw an example. If I have these two angles, we'll call them 5 and 6. 5 and 6 are next to each other. So these are two angles that share a vertex. So they both have the same pointy part of the angle. And they also share this side and a side. But they do not share any interior points. So the interior of angle 5 is this part right here, and the interior of angle 6 is this part right here, and there's no overlap. Okay, so let's talk about some non-examples. So the non-examples is where this gets a little confusing because there are things that look like they're adjacent, but they are not actually because they don't fit the definition. So we could have two angles that are really close to each other, but they don't actually share anything. So those are not adjacent. Okay, we would say, they are close to each other, they are next to each other, but they're not adjacent. Okay, that's an example where the English word adjacent, it looks like they're adjacent, they're next to each other, but the geometry definition doesn't work in that situation. Okay, another example would be two angles that share a vertex like this, but they don't share a side. Okay, so the blue angle and the green angle, they share a vertex, but they don't share a side, so they are not adjacent. Okay, let's try another one. If you have, this is your first angle, and then you actually have a green angle that comes off of the blue one like this. These two share a side, but they do not share a vertex, so those are not adjacent. I have one more non-example. If you have, this is your starting angle, and then the second angle shares this side. It shares the vertex, but it's right here. This is, remember the other one had a side right here. So they share this side that's both blue and green. The problem here is that they share some interior points. So the interior of the green angle is this part, and the interior of the blue angle is this part. And you can see there's some overlap there. So that's the problem there. They share interior points. Okay, so let's start talking about some examples here. So we are supposed to name a pair of angles that fits each of these descriptions. So we want two angles that are complementary. So I need to look in the picture and find two angles that would add up to 90 degrees. So if you can't remember, write yourself a note. Complementary means they add up to 90 degrees. So remember, they do not have to be next to each other. So my first guess would be 28 and 72. But if I add those two up, you get 100. So that's too big. That 108 is too big. There's no way I can add something to 108 and get 90 because we don't have negative angles. Okay, so the last one is 62. If I do 62 and 28, those two add up to 90, so that would be perfect. Okay, I'm going to start with naming the 28-degree angle. This one, there's only, I could use 3 letters to name it, or I could use 1 letter to name it, and it's easier to do 1 letter, so I'm going to call that one angle B. There's only one angle B in the picture, and okay, so then the other one I want to name is this one right here. I can't call it angle E because there's actually 3 different angle E's in the picture. So I need to use 3 letters to name that angle. And if I were to draw that angle, I would either go this way or I would go this way. So name the angle, write down the letters that or of the points that you pass over while you're drawing it, doing a dot to dot. So I'm going to go alphabetically and say angle F, E, G. Okay. The next question says name 2 angles that are supplementary. Supplementary means adds up to 180 degrees. Remember, they don't have to be next to each other. Since it has to add up to such a big number, I bet we're going to use the 108 number. So if I do 180 minus 108, you get 72, which is this angle here. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to start with the 72-degree angle. That one is the only angle that has a vertex at J, so I can call it angle J. But once again, the other one has a vertex at E, and there's 3 angles with a vertex of E. So to name it, I'm going to imagine drawing it. I went over the D, then the E, then the G. Okay, last one. I want 2 angles that are adjacent to each other, so they need to be next to each other, sharing a vertex, sharing a side, but no interior points. That's going to be this angle here and this angle here. Those 2 are next to each other. I've already named them up above. So one of them we called angle FEG, and the other one is angle DEG. Okay, we are going to do this example and pause for now. So we know that these 2 angles are complements. So that means that the measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 3 is 90 degrees. Then they told us that the measure of angle 3 is 53. So I can erase this part and put a 53 in there. Now we just need to solve this equation to figure out what the measure of angle 5 is. So minus 53 minus 53. The measure of angle 5 will be 37 degrees. That's all you have to do there. Let's try the next one. Angle 4 is a supplement of angle 2. So the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 2 is 180. That's what supplementary means. Then it tells us the measure of angle 4 is 53 degrees. So 53. And we want to find the measure of angle 2. So to solve this equation, you would subtract 53 from both sides and get 127 degrees.